Now turn to Part 1.
You will hear a conversation between a customer and a salesman at a car showroom. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good morning. Please take a seat. How can I help you?
Well, I'm thinking of buying a new car and I'd like some advice.
Sure, yes. Had you got any particular make in mind?
I'm interested in a leader. I've had one before and liked it, but I haven't really made up my mind.
Sure. We've got various models. Right. What about the engine size? Any ideas?
The one I've got at the moment's a 1.2-litre engine, but I find it a bit slow on long journeys. I'd like a bit more power this time. A 1.4 should do. I don't think I need a 1.6 or anything.
Right. Well, I think the model you're looking at is the Max. Here's a picture.
Oh, yes. Have you got one in?
Yes, I'll take you to have a look at it in a minute. I'll just get a few more details. Is there anything else to do with the engine? What kind of gear change do you want? I presume you want a manual.
I'd want automatic. I've never driven a car with manual gears.
Right. Well now, here's the colour chart for the Max. Have you given that any thought? This blue's very popular at the moment.
Yes, it is nice. I like blue. What's it called? Royal?
Yes.
But actually, I think I prefer this lighter shade here. Sky.
Yes, that's popular too.
I think I'll go for that.
You might have to wait a week or so for that colour, but I assume that'll be okay.
Oh, yes, fine.
Well, we can go outside and you can have a good look at one, and perhaps take it out. But first, can I just ask you about finance? The cash price is going to be somewhere in the region of 7,500. How would you like to pay? Are you in a position to pay cash, or would you need credit?
I'd like credit, provided the terms are reasonable.
Well, you can discuss that with my colleague in a moment. We have various arrangements. Would you be interested in us taking your present car as part exchange?
Yes.
OK, fine. So I'll just need some details from you, and then we can do a valuation. Is that OK?
Fine, yes.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Could I have your full name?
Wendy Harries. That's Harries.
And is that Mrs., Miss, Ms?
It's Doctor, actually.
Oh, right. And your address?
20 Green Banks.
Is that green spelled as in the colour?
Yes, that's right.
OK.
Alton.
Is that O-L-T-O-N?
Not quite. It begins with an A, not an O.
Oh, yes. That's in Hampshire, isn't it?
That's right.
And do you know your postcode?
Yes, it's GU8 9EW.
Do you have a daytime phone number?
Well, I work at the hospital, but it's a bit difficult to get hold of me. I can give you a number just for messages, and then I'll get back to you when I can. Is that okay?
That's fine.
It's 0798 257 643.
Fine. And about the car you have now, what make is it?
It's a Conti.
Do you know the year or the model name?
I think it's 1996, and it's called a Lion, like the animal.
Then it must be 1994, because they brought out the Fox after that.
Oh, right, yes.
Mileage, roughly?
I'm not sure. I know it's less than 70,000.
OK. What colour is it?
It's grey, metallic grey.
Right. And one last thing. What sort of condition would you say it's in?
I'd probably describe it as reasonable. Do you need to see it? It's parked outside.
Not at the moment, no. Perhaps you could call in one day next week.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 2.
You will hear an admissions officer from a UK university talking to a group of postgraduate students in a university abroad about applying for a place at his university. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
As I said earlier, there is, I think, at Rexford an excellent combination of physical and geographical advantages, as well as having a rural setting and still being close to central London. Something that will certainly be of interest to you is that Rexford is just 35 minutes from London Airport. At Rexford, we have a strong research capability. We came 7th out of 101 universities in last year's research assessment, carried out by a government body, and did particularly well in your particular subjects, engineering and science. Actually, we got a top research grade of 5 for engineering, geography and computer sciences. One further point, and I know from talking to you individually that a number of you may be looking for some experience in industry after the course, is that all our science and engineering research departments have unusually close relationships with industry in the area. Anyway, that's enough sales talk from me. I'll just take a sip of this coffee that's just arrived, thank you, and then I'll say something about what actually happens when you apply. Right. Now, if you do decide to make an application, what you do is send it directly to me in my department. I will then immediately send confirmation and the application process begins. And I'd like to say at this point that you shouldn't worry if this process doesn't work all that quickly. I mean, occasionally there are postal problems, but most often the hold-up is caused by references. The people you give as referees, shall we say, take their time to reply. Anyway, it's absolutely normal for this process to take 3 to 4 months. What I do in this period is keep in touch with you and reassure you that things are moving along. One of the ways we've devised to help you decide about applying, as well as later when you've been accepted, hopefully, is to put you in contact with, if possible, a student from your own country who is at present studying with us. What you can do is phone them up, we will of course liaise between you, and discuss your concerns with them. That way you can get an objective opinion of what you can expect if you come to live and study at Rexford. Not only the academic atmosphere, but important details like what the leisure facilities are like, and whether the English weather and food are really as awful as everybody says.
No.
If you decide you can face it, The contact can also help you just before you leave with tips on what to pack and that sort of thing. At the moment, I think we've got 2 second-year students and 1 postgraduate from this country.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, to move on to the other concerns you expressed earlier. At a UK university, as I'm sure you know, you will be in an environment where independent learning is the norm, which takes most students a while to adjust to, and at a time when you will be separated from your normal surroundings, and in most cases, your family. This can be a difficult time. But remember that something like 25% of our student body are international students like yourselves, and that there are several organisations in the university and city whose main purpose is to offer help and ensure that your time with us is enjoyable and useful. 1 or 2 of you touched on the subject of accommodation earlier, so I'll just add a few points. It is the university's policy to give priority in the allocation of residence places to 3 categories, and those are visiting students, exchange students, and new postgraduate students. However, demand exceeds supply, so there is still a need to put your name down early for campus accommodation, particularly if your family is accompanying you. This means that the earlier you decide whether you want to study with us, and so get the procedure moving, the better it will be for everybody. Yes?
What if you would prefer to live outside the university?
If you're planning to live off campus, you've got to sort things out even earlier. As with everything in short supply, the good accommodation gets snapped up months before the beginning of term. In other words, if you're starting in October, you need to be thinking about it in June, or at the very latest July. So you do need to think very carefully about what you need, how much you can afford to pay well in advance. What you can't do is leave it until a few days before the start of term. The agencies in town are pretty good. It's just a matter of contacting them in good time. Of course, we have a full-time accommodation officer available to help all students. She'll get in touch with you when you're accepted. She's got plenty of contacts in the town and will deal with the agencies on your behalf. 1 or 2 of you asked me earlier about your level of spoken English. Obviously, most of you have already achieved a lot. I wish I could speak your language half as well. Having said that, though, I'm afraid the lecturers will make little or no allowance for the presence of non-native speakers in the audience. So anything you can do to improve your spoken English, even beyond the pretty high levels most of you have already reached, will help make your stay with us that bit more fun for you. Some extra practice before you arrive is worth more than, for example, private lessons afterwards when you won't really have time. Oh, and one last thing before I invite further questions. It's very important that you always...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 3. You will hear 2 theatre studies students discussing stage and screen performances of Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 and 22. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 and 22.
Did you make notes while you were watching the performances of Romeo and Juliet, Gemma?
Yes, I did. I found it quite hard, though. I kept getting too involved in the play.
Me too. I ended up not taking notes. I wrote down my impressions when I got home. Do you mind if I check a few things with you, in case I've missed anything? And I've also got some questions about our assignment.
No, it's good to talk things through. I may have missed things too.
Okay, great. So, first of all, I'm not sure how much information we should include in our reviews.
Right. Well, I don't think we need to describe what happens, especially as Romeo and Juliet is one of Shakespeare's most well-known plays.
Yeah, everyone knows the story. In an essay, we'd focus on the poetry and Shakespeare's use of imagery, etc., but that isn't really relevant in a review. We're supposed to focus on how effective this particular production is.
We should say what made it a success or a failure.
And part of that means talking about the emotional impact the performance had on us. I think that's important.
Yes, and we should definitely mention how well the director handled important bits of the play, like when Romeo climbs onto Juliet's balcony.
And the fight between Mercutio and Tybalt.
Yes. It would also be interesting to mention the theatre space and how the director used it, but I don't think we'll have space in 800 words.
No, okay. That all sounds quite straightforward.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 23 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 23 to 30.
So, what about the Emporium Theatre's production of the play?
I thought some things worked really well, but there were some problems too.
Yeah. What about the set, for example?
I think it was visually really stunning. I'd say that was probably the most memorable thing about this production.
You're right. The set design was really amazing. But actually, I have seen similar ideas used in other productions.
What about the lighting? Some of the scenes were so dimly lit it was quite hard to see.
I didn't dislike it. It helped to change the mood of the quieter scenes.
That's a good point.
What did you think of the costumes?
I was a bit surprised by the contemporary dress, I must say.
Yeah, I think it worked well, but I'd assumed it would be more conventional.
Me too. I liked the music at the beginning, and I thought the musicians were brilliant, but I thought they were wasted because the music didn't have much impact in Acts 2 and 3.
Yes, that was a shame.
One problem with this production was that the actors didn't deliver the lines that well. They were speaking too fast.
It was a problem, I agree, but I thought it was because they weren't speaking loudly enough, especially at key points in the play.
I actually didn't have a problem with that.
It's been an interesting experience watching different versions of Romeo and Juliet, hasn't it?
Definitely. It's made me realise how relevant the play still is.
Right. I mean, a lot's changed since Shakespeare's time, but in many ways nothing's changed. There are always disagreements and tension between teenagers and their parents.
Yes, that's something all young people can relate to, more than the violence and the extreme emotions in the play.
How did you find watching it in translation?
Really interesting. I expected to find it more challenging, but I could follow the story pretty well.
I stopped worrying about not being able to understand all the words and focused on the actors' expressions. The ending's pretty powerful.
Yes, that somehow intensified the emotion for me.
Did you know Shakespeare's been translated into more languages than any other writer?
What's the reason for his international appeal, do you think?
I was reading that it's because his plays are about basic themes that people everywhere are familiar with.
Yeah, and they can also be understood on different levels. The characters have such depth.
Right, which allows directors to experiment and find new angles.
That's really important because...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear a lecturer on a languages course talking about the impact of digital technology on Icelandic, the native language of Iceland. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Right, everyone, let's make a start. Over the past few sessions, we've been considering the reasons why some world languages are in decline. And today I'm going to introduce another factor that affects languages and the speakers of those languages, and that's technology, and in particular, digital technology. In order to illustrate its effect, I'm going to focus on the Icelandic language, which is spoken by around 321,000 people, most of whom live in Iceland, an island in the North Atlantic Ocean. The problem for this language is not the number of speakers, even though this number is small, nor is it about losing words to other languages, such as English. In fact, the vocabulary of Icelandic is continually increasing, because when speakers need a new word for something, they tend to create one, rather than borrowing from another language. All this makes Icelandic quite a special language. It's changed very little in the past millennium, yet it can handle 21st century concepts related to the use of computers and digital technology. Take, for example, the word for web browser. This is vafri in Icelandic, which comes from the verb to wander. I can't think of a more appropriate term because that's exactly what you do mentally when you browse the internet. Then there's an Icelandic word for podcast, which is too hard to pronounce, and so on. Icelandic, then, is alive and growing, and it's a big but, young Icelanders spend a great deal of time in the digital world, and this world is predominantly English. Think about smartphones. They didn't even exist until comparatively recently, but today young people use them all the time to read books, watch TV or films, play games, listen to music and so on. Obviously, this is a good thing in many respects because it promotes their bilingual skills, but the extent of the influence of English in the virtual world is staggering, and it's all happening really fast. For their parents and grandparents, the change is less concerning because they already have their native speaker skills in Icelandic. But for young speakers, well, the outcome is a little troubling. For example, teachers have found that playground conversations in Icelandic secondary schools can be conducted entirely in English, while teachers of much younger children have reported situations where their classes find it easier to say what is in a picture using English rather than Icelandic. The very real and worrying consequence of all this is that the young generation in Iceland is at risk of losing its mother tongue. Of course, this is happening to other European languages too. But while internet companies might be willing to offer, say, French options in their systems, it's much harder for them to justify the expense of doing the same for a language that has a population the size of a French town, such as Nice. The other drawback of Icelandic is the grammar, which is significantly more complex than in most languages. At the moment, the tech giants are simply not interested in tackling this. So, what is the Icelandic government doing about this? Well, large sums of money are being allocated to a language technology fund that it is hoped will lead to the development of Icelandic-sourced apps and other social media and digital systems. But clearly this is going to be an uphill struggle. On the positive side, they know that Icelandic is still the official language of education and government. It has survived for well over 1,000 years, and the experts predict that its future in this nation-state is sound and will continue to be so. However, there's no doubt that it's becoming an inevitable second choice in young people's lives. This raises important questions. When you consider how much of the past is tied up in a language, will young Icelanders lose their sense of their own identity? Another issue that concerns the government of Iceland is this. If children are learning 2 languages through different routes, neither of which they are fully fluent in, will they be able to express themselves properly?
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.